Welcome to another of my YouTube masterclasses. Now, normally in these masterclasses, we look at something that I'm currently working on, a small part of one of my own paintings. But the truth is, I can't always be working on full paintings. Sometimes I have to take a break, not just to take a break, but to work on other projects. And I have a few things coming up at the moment. I'm actually going to be doing a autumn painting challenge, which it's not going to be quite the same as last year's winter landscape challenge. It's going to be something that's a little more beginner friendly, but that's all I'm going to say about that at the moment. So we're going to do a color mixing video today, and I'm going to show you the process I go through to try and match and mix exact colors. So I've got 4 items that I've picked up from my garden, and we're going to look at how to match them. Now, I have a lot more paint colors than you, so it may be that I just have a ready-made green that's exactly the same as this leaf. But if that's the case, I'll also have a go at mixing this color from more basic colors so that you can see the processes that we might go through to try and get a color match. So the first thing we need to do is just look at this leaf. I've purposely picked one that's mostly all the same color. It's a nice fresh green, but it's not overly bright. It's not sort of full on in your face bright. So that leads me to suspect if I was going to mix it, I would choose one of the warmer blues that's going to slightly dull my mix. I would be leaning towards cobalt, and although it's not a moss green, it has a slight warmth to it, so I would be thinking about using something just a touch up from lemon yellow, but I'm only guessing. So let's have a look first of all at some ready mix greens, and then let's have a look at how we might mix it if we didn't have those or if they're not suitable. And of course, sometimes we can take a ready mix green and we can adjust it. So I've got my box of light greens here. Now, some of these are actually colours that I helped to design. I'm going to have a look at this one. I don't think it's quite right. This is my fresh green from my floral set. I think this would probably need a little more yellow in. So let's pop it here. Yeah, as I suspected, it's too blue. We'll keep it out because we certainly could adjust it. Now I have some green gold. I know for a fact this one is far too yellow. This one here, Terra Verte, this is going to be too dull. It's also an incredibly light, weak pigment, which really needs a few minutes to reactivate from this little pan I've got it in. But you can see that it's not strong enough. I've got a chrome oxide green. Again, I think this one is going to be too dull and too muted. So we're not getting the freshness we need there. And this is just my box of light greens. I absolutely know that anything strong like Viridian or Phthalo green is just going to be too bright for this. We could look at sap green, and sap greens vary a lot between brands. So here I've got some Jackman's sap green. Now I think that's almost the closest so far. We could possibly mix this one and we might get something approximating that. Let's try that. So let's have a little of the sap green and a little of this fresh green. Now, both of these are mixed pigments, by which I mean that the tube has more than one color in. It's not bad, is it? I think we could go a little more into the sap green. Again, it's not quite right. And we can see actually as they're drying, this one here, which was the chrome oxide, is starting to look a little closer, although I still feel it would need more yellow in. So let's look at mixing this, and let's try the combination that I thought of at the beginning, which is cobalt blue and a yellow being slightly warmer than lemon yellow, something like a cadmium yellow light. So these two colours are both by Talon's Rembrandt. And usually when you're mixing a green, you want to start with the yellow simply because it's the weaker pigment. If you go straight in with the blue, you can end up using half a tube just to adjust your colour sufficiently. And let's have a swatch of this. I'm going to add just a touch more of the yellow. I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's pretty close, but I also think that combinations of these other colours could be mixed together and get the same effect. Now I've picked a twig up from my garden. We're not worried about this little leaf. We're looking at this cool brown stem. And this is a colour that beginners struggle to find because it's really not included in most beginners sets unless you get maybe more than 20 colours. So we're going to look at a couple of ready-made options, and I'm going to show you how to mix it from really basic colours. Now, when it comes to neutral greys like this, we can think about a colour called neutral tint. And all of these brown neutral colours are going to be very dark, but you'll need to water them right down. So let's have a look at this Jackman's neutral tint. Now straight away, it's too blue and too grey. It's a beautiful colour, and it certainly could be adjusted. I don't think I have any other brands of neutral tint, so let's go on to another colour. Now, one colour that immediately springs to mind is this Sepia by Talon's Rembrandt. Again, it's a very dark colour, but we can water it down a little. So that's interesting, isn't it? It's almost as if we could take these two colours and mix them together. There is a slight danger of them going a little greenish, but nevertheless, I think that could be a workable option. Now, both of these colours, the sepia and the neutral tint, this one is Talon's Rembrandt, these vary vastly between brands. So you might find that the brand you have is just right for this. This is actually a colour that I like to mix, and I like to mix it from raw umber and Payne's grey. But there is a caveat to that. It's only going to work with certain brands. So I'm going to use Talons. So I've got my raw umber here. What you're looking for is a raw umber that isn't too yellow, basically. The Jackman's one also works. Raw umber is a weak colour. I'm going to mix it with some Jackman's Payne's grey. I've also got the Talons Payne's grey, and I believe as well, after looking at it, you could possibly use the neutral tint here, and we'll swatch this. And we're starting to get this very neutral colour. Now this one has gone slightly greenish, and this is why I say you have to be careful with the brands you choose, because if your raw umber is too yellow and your Payne's grey is too blue, you can get a greenish tinge. I think if you looked at this one alone, it wouldn't look greenish, but when I look at this one here, there's almost a lilac quality to it in places. Another thing that we can do is to take a warm brown and to neutralize it with something like a purple leaning blue, like an ultramarine. So let's take a color that most beginners will have, and this is burnt umber, and it's really too warm and too chocolatey for most stems that you'll find in the garden. I'm not saying that none exist that are this color, but they're very often cooler than this. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this French ultramarine. French ultramarine is the one that leans a little bit more towards purple, but you can use any ultramarine here. And what we'll do is we'll cool down our brown. And on this occasion, I think this was absolutely the right color to choose. Although for some of these darker areas, I'd be inclined, if I had it, to add a little sepia. Let's look now at this piece of terracotta pot that I found in my lean-to where I do my gardening, and talk about how we match this sort of colour, because it's a colour we often need if we're painting garden scenes. There are lots of pots in there and a lot of them are going to be terracotta, but they do vary a lot. Some of them are going to lean towards brown, some of them to red, some to orange, or even to burgundy. So we want to start by sort of thinking about where it leans towards. Now, some of the colours that I would instantly think of here are burnt sienna. Now that's not bad, but it's a little bit too orangey for my liking. Let's look at red oxide. Now the oxide reds, this is a pigment that varies vastly, and so you're not going to get the same thing with all brands. This one, as you can see, is fairly reddish. Sometimes a red like this would be labelled Venetian red. All of these red colours that you get, oxide red, Venetian red, English red, it's all the same pigment. They just come in such a variety. But again, it could be adjusted, and we could even mix the two together. That's not bad either. If you have a smaller range of colours, what I would be thinking about is possibly getting some burnt umber and mixing a scarlet red in. Let's try that. This is burnt umber dark from the SAA. I don't actually remember what this colour looks like. I have so many in my box, so we can see there it's too brown and not warm enough. I'm going to try a little bit of this Talon's Rembrandt Cadmium Red Deep, and let's see what we get. It's not a bad match at all. I think it's certainly usable. Just for fun, let's try another red oxide I have. This is actually a Venetian red. Again, it's that red oxide pigment, and we can see how much more burgundy it is. Overall, I think my mixed colour was the best one. I think I would just need to go a little darker and a little less water to get it spot on. Now, it wouldn't be a garden colour mixing video without at least one flower. So let's look at what colour might be right for this. Now, straight away, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking cobalt violet, but you may not have any pale violets. We'll swatch that one, but let's look also at how we can mix this because it's really quite easy. Now, I see beginners go wrong so many times mixing clear violets, lilacs and purples like this one. And what they do is they try and mix from the wrong blue and the wrong red. So before we try our ready mixed lilacs, let's look at how we mix a colour like this. Now, what you don't want is to be trying to mix from reds like this. There's too much yellow in them and you're going to get more sort of aubergine muddy purples. You need to be looking at your clear pinks. One of my favourites is this quinacridone rose, but something like a permanent rose, something that's that real blue Barbie pink. And then for your blue, you can use an ultramarine or a cerulean. I would go more for cerulean if you're mixing these soft lilac colours. You can mix the purples from phthalo blues. If you're doing that, you're best to use the red shade rather than the green shade. Now let's try my first instinct, which was cobalt violet, and then we'll have a go at mixing from blue and pink. So I've got some SAA cobalt violet here. It's a nice colour. It's not quite pink enough for our little flower. Another interesting colour I've got is this Jackman's ultramarine. I think it's ultramarine pink. It's a kind of similar colour. It's a little more transparent. Now, because this colour is so pink, we could actually try a quinacridone magenta. So that's a pink that leans a little bit more towards purple. It's too pink for our flower, but we could certainly mix these two colours together and get a pretty good match. You'll notice I'm not going for anything like a permanent blue violet. The violets are just going to be too strong and too much of a sort of a royal purple for our little pinky violety flower. So what about mixing it from some more basic pigments? As I said, my first instinct with a lilac rather than a strong purple is always to start with a cerulean blue. I've got some Jackman's cerulean here. It's in this little pot because I split the tube years ago. I've actually got a little bug walking on my finger here. He's come in with the flower. And so we'll start with this. And I'm going to go for my all-time favourite Talon's quinacridone rose. I'll show you the colour here. This is a colour you simply must have in your set. And we can keep adjusting the amount pink and blue. I think that's a pretty good match. It could be a little brighter, in which case I'd be inclined to go back to the quinacridone magenta. And let's just try a very tiny touch of French ultramarine. And I think we've got our match. Now, if you are interested in the upcoming autumn challenge, which is going to be a great free painting challenge, do make sure you're on my mailing list. You can get on my mailing list by downloading any of the free PDFs in the video description or taking any of my free courses. You'll also find those linked in the video description. I only send out a newsletter once a week. Very occasionally you might get an extra email if I have something on sale. I signed up for a mailing list the other day and the next day they sent me 4 emails. I can guarantee you I will never do that. Nobody wants that in their inbox. And I really want to know in the comments if you enjoyed this colour mixing video. If you did, we'll do other subjects and you can leave suggestions in the comments.